Lately, I've been getting a lot of questions about the whole big swim bait, glide bait type deal. You came to the right person to ask. This is the channel where I teach you everything about fish all around the world, domestic and international. And as far as it goes with the big swim baits, you've gone to the right guy. I've got 5 or 6 or 7 swim bait boxes. I'm not sure anymore. Don't ask me how many thousands of dollars worth of stuff are in these boxes. I got no idea. But if you want to learn how to fish a glide bait, I'm going to make it real simple for you. Watch this. So first of all, why big swim baits? Before you learn about glide baits in particular, you need to learn why you should be throwing something like this in the first place. I mean, what's the whole point of going bass fishing and putting down your jig rod and picking up something like this? So, first of all, big swim baits is taking the jump and going into big swim baits it's a full-on commitment, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But what you're doing is you're looking for a really big fish, more than likely the top 5 or top 10% of fish in the entire body of water that you're fishing in. These are not numbers baits. These are for real trophy hunters and for when you're fishing in a tournament. I got a story to tell you real quick. I'll make it real short, real quick here. So, at least 11, 12 years ago, I got one of my first big swim baits when I was a kid, or when I was a teen. And it was a line through Savage Gear swim bait. One of the 3D shads they used to sell back then, or the 3D roach if you're from Europe. And I was throwing that bait around actually with the intention of fishing it for stripers. I took that bait and I was throwing it around and I was getting follows by big largemouth. I didn't get one of them to eat it right then, but I did get a lot of big fish to follow it. And those memories kind of stuck with me, and I was like, well, maybe if it was a little bit different, I could maybe make them eat it. Fast forward a few years, I got my first glide bait. It was actually one of these. My first ever glide bait I had picked up was a River to Sea S-Waver 168 in this color. And I had a bluegill one. I took it to this pond where I was fishing in, catching 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 pounders back to back to back. And I was like, well, I'm getting tired of all these 2 and 3 pounders. I need to upgrade to a bigger size of class of fish. So I picked up my first swim bait. It was about this big. It was this exact swim bait, actually. So I took it and I went fishing with it. I ended up catching, on my first day, a 5 pounder out of this tiny pond where I didn't know that they were even that big in there. So a little while later, I went and I picked up another swim bait. It was a Savage Gear. Actually, it was one like this. It was a Savage Gear Shine Glide, like this. It said it was a bluegill color back then. And I was throwing that around, and I caught another one that was about 6 pounds. And I thought to myself, there might be something to this big bait stuff after all. So then, over the winter, this was in November when this happened, all those years ago. So they got too cold eventually to fish this type of stuff. Come the following spring, I had bought a whole bunch of big swim baits over the winter, and I had learned a bunch of things and tried to educate myself on how to use them over that winter so that the following pre-spawn I'd be able to catch them. I was dead set on catching a 10-pound bass. So we got around to spring the following year, early pre-spawn, mid-February, all through the whole month of March, I started throwing this stuff, and I caught more big bass than I had ever seen in my entire life in a short couple of weeks period. I had both seen and caught them. I had ridiculous bags. I caught a 30-pound bag as a bank fisherman, pulling out 7 pounders. I had an 8 pounder. I had a couple of 6s that day. It was ridiculous. What had happened was they had pushed this big school of gizzard shad into the back of this small cove, and there were a bunch of giant bass feeding on them, and I was just able to whack and just beat on them on these big baits. That is why you want to be able to fish big swim baits, and why you need to learn how to fish this technique, because you'll catch more big fish than you ever have in your entire life on any other stuff. Most baits people take, they go fishing and we try to get lucky. That's not the situation when you're picking up a big swim bait. You're looking purposefully for trophy fish that are larger than what you normally catch. Now, very shortly, I'm going to tell you about the 5 principles of swim bait fishing that you need to know before you pick this stuff up. Because I know that's a cute story and everything, and I know you see all these Instagram posts, you see the giant bass being caught on this swim bait or that swim bait, and all the YouTubers and stuff are making it trendy, Everybody's talking about it, and you think that these things are just landing giant bass left and right, and for a long time they have. But there's some things that you need to know before you ever get into this game. Number one is that you have to pay the price of entry, okay? Swim bait fishing is just not cheap. There's no other way I can put that. These things are expensive, all right? It's probably the most expensive way that there is to bass fish, I would imagine. I've been doing this all my life, literally since I've been alive. I don't remember the first fish I caught. I was told that it was a largemouth bass by my parents, and I was maybe, 2 years old or something like that. These things, you got to pay the price of admission. A really good swim bait, you're going to pay a minimum of 30 to 40 bucks, especially when we're talking about glide baits. There are some good glide baits that are cheaper, obviously, like the two I had showed you earlier in this video just now. But honestly speaking, man, the majority of big swim baits, if you spend less than 30 bucks on it, it probably sucks. There's no way around it. There are some exceptions, and some can be modified to be better. But unless you're going to spend $30 to $40 minimum on a big glide bait, it's probably not going to swim as good. Even then, with these smaller ones, after you modify them, there's a freaking world of difference between this and this. I mean, they're just night and day different. They just don't swim the same. So you're going to spend a good amount of money on that. Just spend the most amount of money that you're comfortable with, and get the best glide bait that you can. Next principle is you should not ever expect to get a lot of bites. Don't pick these up expecting you're going to go out and whack them. This is a one of two case scenario. Either you're in a tournament and you're looking for a kicker fish, or you're hunting for giants. Those are the only two situations where I pick up a big swim bait. Or if I'm going to someplace new that I've never fished before and I will just want to see what's in there. If you take a big enough swim bait, you'll get enough followers where you can kind of gauge the size of fish that are in that lake. Those are really the only times where you should even consider picking up something that size. Next thing, the next principle of swim bait fishing is water clarity. When you're talking about water clarity and big swim baits, these are lures that need to be seen to be eaten. They don't have a whole lot of vibration, a whole lot of flash, a whole lot of extra attractors, this and that to get bites. You need at least 2 to 3 feet of water visibility to be throwing a glide bait in the first place. It needs to be seen to be eaten. You don't want to throw this in chocolate milk. If you have a heavy rain and it murks up the water real bad, you're really better off doing something else. I would much rather go flip a jig or go throw a chatterbait or a spinnerbait or something like that instead of picking one of these up. If they can't see it, more times than not, I won't throw it. The fourth principle is consistency and commitment. You have to keep throwing these. You're going to get frustrated early on when you're throwing big swim baits because you're going to keep throwing and throwing and throwing and throwing, and you may not get a bite, you may not get a fish. All these Instagram posts and all this talk on the internet will have you thinking that you're just going to go slay giant ones. Don't go around believing that, man. What you don't see is the 8 days or the 10 hours straight, back to back to back, or the couple of weeks they go without a bite, throwing it every day and not even seeing a fish, or even just getting one bite or a couple bites, or they hook one and it comes off or whatever. It's a grind when you pick up these baits because you're definitely not looking for everything. You're not looking for 10 bites. You're looking for a bite. You're looking for the bite. And that's why this whole thing is it's a full-on commitment. You have to keep throwing it, and even when you see them busting in the middle of the lake, chasing shad and stuff like that, you have to give up those 2, 3, 4 pounders because you're looking for that 9, 10, 12 pounder. That's just how this game goes. The last principle is that no two baits are exactly alike. So even these garage baits that are made by one guy, they look exactly alike, but they swim totally different. They're not the same at all. Even baits made by the same manufacturer, or baits that are in the same category, baits that look very much alike. These are both glide baits, yes, but they swim completely differently and they have completely different properties. There are no two glide baits that are exactly alike. After you've gotten one, you've gotten used to it for a while, you can pick up another one and try it, and it'll still glide and everything, but it'll still be completely different. Those are some things that you need to consider when you're getting into the big swim bait fishing. There are going to be no two baits that are exactly alike, so you may even want to grab 2, maybe 3 to start with and figure out what you like and what you don't like and what suits your style. Everybody talking about, oh, glide baits are awesome, just buy this one. That may not be in your wheelhouse. So if you use one and you don't have the greatest time with it, Don't sweat that. Don't sweat about that. Just try another one first, or try a different style and see what sits right with you before you even decide on whether or not you want to fully commit to big swim baits and get a full-on rod and reel put together specifically for throwing this kind of stuff. All right, so now that I've explained these couple of things, let me go over to the table and explain to you the differences between the three types of swim baits, well, the three types of glide baits, and how these things actually work. All right, y'all, so we got the tabletop going on. I've got a selection of glide baits out here in front of me, just a few for example purposes. Now, what you've not been told by a bunch of the other YouTubers and guys that are talking about swim baits and glide baits is that there are a few different types of glide baits. First of all, primarily, you have your wide glides. For example, here's a Depths 250 slide swimmer. That's probably, well, arguably the most popular one ever made. Then you've got the, this is a bull shad glide bait. We've got the Storm Arashi glides. Those came out in the last few years. I like these pretty well. Now, ideally, what would separate the wide glides from most of the other glide baits on the market is, number one, you can tell that you have one by looking at the angle from that joint in the back. Glide baits only have one joint. A lot of people will get it confused. They'll see one, a swim bait swimming through the water, and they think that it's a glide bait. No, a glide bait only has one joint. It's a two-piece bait. If it has anything more than two pieces, it's not a glide bait. But if you're looking at it, you'll see that the angle on all of these, you're looking at the tails, are not that sharp. You see, you're getting a decent bend in the bait, but you're not getting a real sharp angle. What's happening when you fish these is that it'll swim to one side and these 2 points will make contact, and that's where it stops at. And it'll glide out to one side and it will do the same thing on the other side. You get a long, smooth, wide glide. Now, depending on the overall profile of the wide glide that you have, you'll get a longer, smoother glide. For example, this Depths 250 being at, what, 9 or 10 inches, something like that. And being perfectly well balanced and having that angle on it and everything, you'll get a very, very wide, smooth glide, 3 to 6 feet from left to right at times, in fact. Same thing with this bull shad. You won't get 5-6 feet from side to side, but you can pull off about a 3-foot glide from left to right when you're fishing this bait. The angle that you've got going on there and that longer body really help to facilitate that side to side glide in the water. Now, the longer and more sleek the body is, typically speaking, the wider and smoother your glide is going to be from side to side. Now, you do have some deeper body baits that are designed to imitate shad. For example, this was a fairly new one. This is the new Toad Thumper glide bait. Looks just like a shad. Another thing, and just like the others, you got that angle right there, not very sharp. But this one will very much go side to side just fine. Very, very wide because of that angle. It has that deeper body. One thing you need to know about this type of shape, when you have a wide glide that's this shape, it will helicopter on you on the cast. So you want to kind of get a good underhand toss when you're fishing these baits. You want to do that anyway when you're fishing a big swim bait, but especially to eliminate that helicoptering and spinning in the air when you're throwing that bait. Baits of that profile. So your wide glides work best out over open water or, wider areas where you're not sure about what's in the water, or if you're just fishing around, you're not throwing at anything in particular, you're just coming down the bank, or you're fishing over submerged vegetation or brush piles somewhere. You're not aiming at anything, you're just fishing a wider general area. These big wide glides do a good job at fishing those particular areas. The next type of glide bait that you'd want to be looking for is the chop glides. Now, choppy glides, this is a Spro KGB, and this is a bull shad trick shad. Well, the things that really separate these from the wide glides is a much sharper angle. If you're looking at that, that's almost a hard letter L shape. Now, instead of only going so far and catching itself and getting a smooth glide from side to side, these baits will almost turn on top of themselves. And so you're getting a much sharper, harder left to right turn when you're fishing these choppy glides. That's why they're called chop glides. They don't necessarily smoothly glide from side to side. You're getting a hard left to right action when you're using them. They're more aggressive and they tend to fish better at higher speeds. You can fish these wide glides as slow as you can turn the handle and still get action out of them, and that will just give you a wide, meandering left to right kind of thing. You can't really pull that off with these chop glides because the angle is so sharp that the glide is very narrow and it doesn't do well at being fished real slow like that. I tend to fish these with a little bit more slack in the line, and I make them just kind of chop left and right on kind of on top of themselves. What they do well is fishing smaller, more confined areas, and when you're aiming at a target. Let's say that you're fishing right next to a dock, or you're fishing next to some lay-down trees, boulders in the water, anything that you can visibly see. Or maybe you happen to be sight fishing, you see a big one, you cast maybe a good 10 feet in front of them, and you walk this bait out in front of them. That's what these baits are good at. They also do a good job at being kept in a strike zone for a longer period of time. They don't have as much forward travel, so it can keep them in the same spot for longer. Lastly, the last type of glide bait that we're going to talk about is the hybrid glide baits. My example for this one is the Bait Sanity Chimera Shad and the DRT Clash 9. So what makes these unique is that you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. You're getting a little bit of a chop glide, but also kind of a wide glide. When you would pick these up is when you're not really sure which direction you want to go, or if you're not sure what type of glide bait really fits your style, or if you just don't have the budget to be buying 3, 4, 5 different glide baits to be trying a bunch of different things. You can buy one of these and you'll really get, let's say, 2 or 3 different baits out of one lure. Now, the characteristics that separate these are you'll have that hard bend, just like how you get out of your chop glides. However, if you modify them or fish them a certain way, you'll get the benefits of a wide glide. I'm going to show you this on video when we do a little bit of on the water stuff. As far as it goes with the Clash 9, that's the hardest angle that we've seen yet, and you can also fish it one way or the other. What makes this bait unique is that it comes with a bunch of different lips and tails that you can buy, and you can get pretty much any action out of it that you want. It's got a bunch of different lips in it, but glide mode is without a lip. You have this V-tail that'll give you one type of action, but then you also have the standard tail that comes with the bait, and that'll give it another type of action. Glide mode is, well, wide glide mode is normally with the tail facing down like that. Most glide baits come with replaceable tails. This is not unique just to this bait. The majority of glide baits on the market that you'll buy come with extra tails. Some of them come with extra pieces that you can modify the lures with also. But that right there will give you a pretty wide side-to-side glide. But if I want it to be more choppy, I can just take that tail, flip it the other way around, and it'll become a whole nother different bait. That's what's unique about these types of lures. You can use one lure all day long, take out the tail, put in a lip, flip the tail around, do whatever, and you can get different actions out of it. Or in the case of the Chimera, I can just fish it differently with my retrieve, and I can get 2 different types of actions out of it, out of the same lure. So that about covers it. I already know somebody's gonna, by the way, I already know somebody's gonna ask me what's up with the orange things. These are called tracers. This is a little crooked, I don't know how that happened. But these are called tracers. If I'm fishing and I can't see the bait very well, I have it far out in front of me, or the water's a little dingy, you can buy these aftermarket tracers or stickers, and you can stick them on your glide baits that'll help you to see them better. You want a good pair of polarized sunglasses when you're fishing glide baits, because it's a very visual bait and very visual presentation. Unless you're fishing it on forward facing sonar and it's out of sight, More times than not, you're going to be looking right at it, and you get to watch the fish come out and eat it. It's actually pretty exciting. On the topic of getting followers, because I know there's going to be a lot of people saying I'm getting follows, but they won't eat. In that scenario, you want to impart a little bit more action on the bait. Normally, if I'm getting that smooth side-to-side glide and I get a fish just following it, I'll pop it and I'll give it some slack and let it swing out to one side. And normally, when I do that, that's where you get your strike. All right, now moving on, we're going to do some underwater stuff. We're going to show you how these baits work in action, and then we're going to wrap the video up. All right, now to show you the actions of these baits and how to actually fish each type, I've got 3 baits out. This is the bull shad glide with the V joint. That's your wide glide bait. I've got a trick shad, my bull shad. This one's your chop glide. And lastly, I've got a Bait Sanity Chimera shad. This is more of your hybrid. It does a little bit of everything. So here's how you actually use these things. Now, when you're fishing a wide glide, what you need to do is give it kind of an underhand toss. That's an important thing. You never want to snap cast with a big swim bait. If you just give it your normal cast over the shoulder, you're probably going to break it off because you're putting a lot of pressure on that line. Generally, we're only using somewhere between 20 to 30 pound line, even with these big 5 and 6 ounce baits. And if you're using straight braid to a leader that a lot of people like to use, normally they're going 65 to 80 pound braid, but remember, it has no stretch. So if you do that over the shoulder snap, going that heavy kind of prevents you from breaking off a lot of baits, but it can still happen. So you don't really want to throw over your shoulder. You give kind of your underhand toss. So when you're fishing a wide glide, one of the easiest ways to do it is just to give it a steady retrieve. Throw it out and just reel it straight back. What you want is a slow retrieve, just fast enough to still get action out of the bait. These baits have a built-in action. As you can see, it's kind of going side to side right here. Throw it out and reel it straight back in. On a faster gear ratio reel, you would slow it down even more than that. But a steady wind is the easiest way to fish a glide bait. Now, if you got a wide glide and you want to get it to go even wider, what you do is you give it half turns and quarter turns on the handle. Will get your bait to swing side to side wider. Actually, more times than not, I prefer to fish them like this. But you have to figure out what cadence it is that they want, just like how you do when you're fishing a jerkbait. So you might give it 3 or 4 quarter turns and pause, and then give it a few more quarter turns and pause. Generally, I'll give it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, somewhere between 4 to 6 turns, and I'll give it a stop. And then I'll twitch it a few more times and just, let it sit and pause. So a lot of times what I'm doing with the wide glides, throw it out, let it sink down to the depth I want it at, a couple of feet down, a couple of quarter turns, and a pause. Quarter turns, pause. This is actually how I'll fish these wide glides a lot of times. If I'm fishing it in a river for stripers or something like that, I'll fish it faster. But generally, this is how I'm doing it. And as you can see, this bait's kind of swinging left and right wider than it was in the beginning. So that's your wide glide. Another way you can fish them is I'll give it a couple quarter turns on the handle and pause, and I'll just sweep with my rod and reel in slack. What's happening when I'm doing that is you're getting a smooth side to side glide, and then when you sweep, it's a lot more erratic. Okay, moving on to the chop glide. Now your chop glide is similar, but it's different. The difference here is that you can give it a straight retrieve
but the action is a lot more narrow. It's not a wide S-turn like how you get with your standard wide glide. You can kind of see here a little bit. It's very, very tight. It's only going a few inches from side to side instead of a foot or two or more from side to side. It's very, very tight. So as a result of that, I don't normally fish them on a straight retrieve so much unless I'm burning it. If they're fish that are up top, they're feeding heavily, you got busting stripers, or they're feeding a big gizzard shad, big largemouth busting big shad on top. That's one of the ways you can fish them, is burning it. If you take a glide bait, you let it sink down a little bit, and you burn it back, one of those chop glides, it's a very tight side-to-side swim. And it looks like a fleeing fish, and that'll get you a lot of bites when they're really aggressive in feeding. But more times than not, when I'm fishing a glide bait, this is the second retrieve. When I'm fishing a chop glide, I like to give it quarter turns and half turns on the handle. And what it's doing is it's just chopping left to right, side to side. I'll even incorporate a little bit of a rod twitch, and that'll get it really chopping side to side. A lot of times I'll pause, and when I have a little bit of a slack on my line, just a semi-slack line, I'll actually twitch that slack. And what's happening is I'm making that glide bait chop more or less in place. This is really good for when you're fishing right up next to a dock, or right next to a blowdown tree, or right next to sea walls or something like that. When you get next to a piece of cover, I'll give it quarter turns and half turns up to that piece of cover. I'll stop and I'll twitch it in place, and it will chop left to right, more or less in the same area. It doesn't have as much forward travel as your wide glide. Last but not least are your hybrid glides. These ones you can do a little bit of both. So same thing, throw it out, it hits the water, you let it sink a little bit. You can give it a steady retrieve. The thing is, they have a side-to-side glide that's wider than you get from a chopping bait, but it's not as wide as a true wide glide. On a steady retrieve, you can see it has that kind of side-to-side deal, but it's not as wide as you would normally get on your standard wide glide bait. However, if you fish this one with quarter turns of the handle, it will still go side to side a respectable distance. I tried to pick colors so y'all could see, but it still has a respectable side to side glide. Now the chop glide element out of the same bait comes when you fish it with very short and sharp movements, the same way you would do with your standard chop glide, or when you're popping the slack in your line, like how I showed you earlier with the chop glide that we just had. Now see when I'm popping that slack, see how much more narrow that is, how much tighter that is. And we'll do a little bit of both. Again, half turns on the handle, keeping a little bit of slack in my line so it can get some travel. If you slow it down and you throw a little bit of slack back towards the bait, giving it those quarter turns on the handle, I can get a kind of a respectable glide from side to side, like a wider swimming bait. However, if I want it to be more choppy, I can make it do that too. Put some slack in there and give it very tight, very sharp movements. And it's real tight. You can burn these also. They have a respectable swim when you burn them as well. They swim well at that speed too. All right, now one more thing I'm going to show you is what we call the side step. What you're doing, let's say that I have a dock out in front of me or a tree out in front of me or something like that. I want to get as close to it as possible without getting snagged. What you can do is you can actually steer your glide bait. Now, depending on if it goes to the left or the right, your target is off to the left or right. You'll cut off your glide bait coming to the opposite side. Let's say that I have a dock right here in front of me to my left, this way. What I would do is I'd throw to the right of the dock, and I would allow my bait to glide left, but every time it comes back to the right, I cut it off and steer it towards the left. You can see how my line and the bait are over here now. There's a lot of places where you can be fishing in big largemouth or big spots or whatever, be sitting up under a dock, and they won't eat a bait unless you get super close to them and give them that opportunity to ambush. Same thing with the guys down in Florida and stuff that figured out that they can use glide baits for snook and other saltwater fish that hide up against seawalls and things like that and docks. You can steer your glide bait to go one direction or the other without getting snagged. One of the things that I find works when I'm doing that is I'll steer the bait and make it bump off of something. For example, I make it bump its nose off of a dock post, or I'll make it make contact with the seawall and bump off of the seawall. Something like that. But that's how you actually fish these baits on the water. Giant bass, giant bass. And that's the biggest one of my new rod, the new Levante rod, Omega bass. And she just ate a Buka shad glide.
Let's get the second one.
That's like the freaking...
Holy cow.
I'm shaking. I'm shaking. I was gliding it back and forth. I felt that tick. And then I just leaned into her and I felt that weight. Look at this.
Oh,
I got the shakes. I got the shakes. I'm telling you.
dude, that is phenomenal.
Mike Buka, don't never stop making baits. Never stop making these baits.
I saw
Buka is a
scope.
god. I'm telling you.
Good thing we stopped.
Shh.
Way that
Giant large.